This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. So without further ado, this is ScreenFiles and Review with MovieRX. What I'm looking at today is a movie called A.M.I, which recently appeared on Netflix. A.M.I revolves around AI. Well, not true AI, it's more of a fuzzy AI, like with Siri for Apple, Bixby for, I think it's Samsung, and Cortana for Microsoft, and so on. So our phones have these automated assistants, and A.M.I, A.M.I, is one of them. I think it stands for Automated Intelligence, Artificial Intelligence, something or another. It's not terribly important. And this movie is not very good. It's not terrible by any stretch. It is watchable, but it doesn't quite reach the level of a guilty pleasure. The movie revolves around this girl who has undergone a very traumatic experience. Her mother died in a car she was driving. And so she's on some type of, I assume, antidepressant, and she's just going through life. The thing is, A.M.I takes itself very, very seriously, the movie, not the AI. Now, the problem with that is that it doesn't give you enough information to take itself quite so seriously. For instance, she is taking meds because of, I guess, depression, grief over the death of her mother. Now, the thing is, grief and depression are not crazy. She literally goes off the deep end very quickly, and there's no explanation given as to why that is. It takes itself so seriously in what's happening to this girl, but doesn't give you any reason why it's happening. As I said earlier, grief and depression are not crazy. If you're undergoing extreme grief over the loss, a sudden violent loss at your hands of a loved one, does not mean you're going to go out and start murdering people, which essentially she does. So it makes no sense for it to take itself as seriously as it does. In fact, it puts a damper on the whole movie. If you've seen the movie, and as I said, please take a look at it. It's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not very good. She starts listening to this artificial intelligence on the phone called A.M.I. And A.M.I starts to assume qualities, vocal qualities, in particular of her mother who died in a car accident. What's going on? Is this demonic possession of her phone? Is she going bonkers? See, now that's the thing. The movie doesn't delineate that very well at all. So you actually don't know necessarily if she's just going nuts. And that's bad, because it would have been a much more effective movie if they had showed her gradual descent into madness, as opposed to just suddenly, out of nowhere, starts killing people with no real basis for it. So that's a problem. The movie starring Anthony Hopkins and Burgess Meredith about a dummy and its ventriloquist who goes on a killing spree, essentially. I think it was made sometime in the mid-70s. Really good movie, by the way. If you haven't seen Magic, check it out. And it has one of the most memorable taglines. Listen to this. Abracadabra, I sit on his knee. Presto, changeo, now he is me. Hocus pocus, we take her to bed. Magic is fun. We're dead. I literally memorized that years ago. It just won't leave my head. It's such a clever, quirky, weird little nursery type rhyme. And A.M.I is essentially the same movie, just a not very good version of the same movie. Now let's add a little MovieRX to this. How can we fix this movie? Visually, it's fine. It's not particularly stunning to look at cinematography-wise, but it's not bad either. It's competently shot, to be sure. So that's not an issue. The acting is not great, nor is it terrible. They're doing what they can. Some actors are stronger than others in this film, but on the whole, it's decent. It's passable acting. First off, have our antagonist learn about this AI. Now, the thing is, don't have it have a seemingly infinite range of adjustability like it does in a movie. Siri cannot imitate your mother or your coach. It's just not in the capabilities, nor can any of the others for that matter. They cannot do that. So don't do it. It's actually cheaper, I would imagine, to just have it sound like a robotic voice, as opposed to having an actor with a very distinctive voice read lines. Don't do that. So instead, as I said, it's just like Siri sounds now. It's a distinctive voice, but it's also uniquely Siri. There's a woman who does that voice, actually. And I have heard no one up to this point sound like her. So it's distinctive. Now, the thing is, have it be that she's going mad. And the deeper she gets into her madness, the more the voice on the phone changes. So when she's totally whacked out of her brain, the voice of Amy would become her mother. In other words, it's just a phone. As in the movie, by the way. It's just a phone. It has no particular powers. It's not possessed. It's just a phone. It's all in her head. And so the greater her madness becomes, the more human, the more reciprocal the relationship is between her and the phone. That would help establish the nuttiness, the craziness necessary to make this story work. In the problems, I mentioned this movie takes itself way too seriously. That needs to stop. There are about, I want to say, 3 or 4 instances of really effective dark humor in this movie. I think there were accidents, frankly, but they're there. And the movie just leaps every time one of them happens. It may be an offhanded comment. It may be a reaction to an event. But these little moments of black humor are perfect tonally for what Amy should be, namely a black comedy. None of this taking itself quite so seriously, just aim at the black comedy, kind of like in the vein of like the later Chucky movies. You're going for humor, just very dark humor. That's more effective than what the movie actually did, which was taking itself too seriously with little moments sprinkled throughout, far too infrequently for my money, of black humor. Make that the tone of the whole movie. In my problems, I mentioned that depression and grief are not insanity. So why did the filmmakers treat it as if it were? So what I would suggest would be an actual diagnosis of some type of mental illness, schizophrenia, something that would make her genuinely crazy, but on the fence, and she has to be medicated as a result. Make up a name of a drug. Work that into the story. Have it be that the symptoms of this drug are, let's say, if you take too much of it, you can display psychopathic and sociopathic tendencies. Something to establish a reason for her going crazy. Now picture this. She's in an accident, an auto accident. She's driving. Her mom's in a car, kills her. Extreme grief, depression. But prior to that, she had these tendencies. And the movie would have to explore that. It wouldn't have to spend a ton of time doing it, but just establish that she was never on the firmest of footing in the first place. So then you introduce these catastrophes into her life, and as this happens, the voice on the phone gradually changes, becoming more and more human. Oh yes, and there's something I didn't mention, and it's worth mentioning, and it would so feed into the idea I'm putting forth. She has a friend who, and this is not explained, and it's the weirdest scene, and it doesn't work in the context of the movie. Her friend has a tendency to not only blow her boyfriends, but tries to blow the antagonist's father. Why is this character there? Now the thing is, in my version, that character is important. Why? Because she'd be making moves, and by the way, I should mention that the character who was trying to blow the antagonist's boyfriend had said numerous times, well, I'm sorry, I should say, she said at least once, she's been doing this for years. And this is important because now imagine this. Imagine she was doing it for years. But imagine the antagonist knew about it. She caught little glances, furtive looks, touches, and so on. So she knew something was wrong, but she kept denying it. She kept pushing it down. So as a result of her losing her grip on sanity, what happens is she starts to act on her impulses, which is aided by taking a drug that makes her more and more unstable if she takes too much. So what happens now is that you have a gradual loss of sanity as the film progresses. She gets weirder and weirder, and the contempt that people like her friend treated her with, which she was aware of, the movie doesn't have her be aware of that. I don't see how you cannot be at some point clued in on what's going on around you in that manner. So what would happen is this would happen over years apparently, and she would notice little things, little hints that something was up with her friend, and she would end up killing her friend like she did in the movie. But in my scenario, it actually makes sense. So I mentioned earlier that A.M.I. is essentially a remake of, I want to say, 1976's Magic. And that's perfectly okay. Own it. So have her slowly but surely descend into madness. Have the phone be a reflection of said madness, becoming more and more human until she just kind of loses her shit entirely, and essentially it's her mother coming from this phone. And I mention this because the way the current movie proceeds, that ending is so unwarranted and so undeserved. It's an awesome ending. I think it's great, but it's so gonzo, nothing else up to that point has earned that ending. It's like, I don't know, introducing Superman for only 2 movies and killing him in the second. You have to earn that. You build to that. And the same thing applies to A.M.I. The idea that ending, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, watch the movie. As I said, it's not a terrible movie. It's watchable, just not a great movie. That ending is so gonzo and over the top that if only it had earned it more, it would have been perfect. In fact, the whole movie, if it had earned that ending, would have been excellent. As a genre classic, even. But as it stands, A.M.I. has a few moments of really effective dark humor, far too few, but they're there nonetheless, with a gonzo ending that is so unearned, it makes you go, WTF did I just see? But with my suggestions, A.M.I., I think, would not only be a better movie, but it would have earned that ending. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review with MovieRX. If you agree or disagree, leave something down in the comments. And if you like what you see, please consider following. Peace.